All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to the Voiceover Network. This edition, we have the Voiceover Hour, The Power of Business Networking with Liz Drury, hosted by Roger Woods and myself. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome members of the Voiceover Network. Welcome non-members. Welcome those in the UK, Europe, the US, and all over the world. We have a fantastic hour lined up for you today. But first, let's see who all's coming in. We like to start these off with just seeing where everyone's coming in from. So if you could, just in the little chat box, if you could type in, let us know where you're listening in from, and we will say hello. All right. I see Sarah Jane is here. We've got Mac in Bicester. I'm sure I'm...
Or even Mark in Bicester, yeah.
Mark in Bicester, you see? I'm sure I'm butchering that up. Naples, Florida. Butte, Scotland. Sheffield, UK. East London. Moors in France. Mm-hmm. Oh, hi, Sarah.
Bonjour.
Great. Wow. Let's see. Bolton, UK. We've got Nottingham, UK. DC, London, South London, Texas. Bonjour and hello. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Great. So my name's Lisa Fisicaro. I'm the Events and Production Coordinator here at the Voiceover Network. The Voiceover Network is all about helping, supporting, and strengthening the voiceover industry. The network was started to help bring our industry together. And we have an amazing community here of members who include voiceover artists of all levels of experience, as well as agents, producers, and casting directors. There are some of you who are watching who are new to our webinars. So we just want to let you know that we run several fantastic events throughout the year, some incredible workshops in person and online. We produce the Buzz magazine, which I should have had a copy with me, but it's a fantastic magazine, quarterly magazine, and we do some amazing webinars every couple of weeks and much more. Right. So we love these webinars so much. It's just a great opportunity to be able to interview some wonderful guests and get a lot of questions answered. We also want to get you guys involved today. So if you could use the hashtag VON webinar, VON webinar, that would be great. And let us know how you're finding things. Right. So on today's webinar, we have Roger Woods. Roger, hi Roger.
Hello.
Roger is a voiceover artist. He's an experienced broadcaster and in journalism for 25 years, and he is one of our VON teachers and an expert in recording home studios.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah. Right. If you guys, as through the webinar, want to ask some questions as we go along, we'll get to as many as possible. Right. So on this hour, we have the wonderful Liz Drury. Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Liz is a British voiceover artist, scientist, and business owner. I'll let her explain that to herself in a minute. She's been a VON member for quite some time now, very active within our community, and we are so thankful to have you on, Liz. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. Right. So let's go ahead and just start things off, Liz. If you could just tell us about your background. So I mentioned the scientist bit. So let's tell people what I mean by that. And also how you got started into voiceover.
Sure. Well, my background, like Lisa just said, is in science. I have a PhD in archaeological science. And something that I was looking at as part of my research were black lumps of tar with human tooth impressions in, which have been called chewing gums. And these were from the Mesolithic, so between 5,000 and 10,000 years old. And I wrote an article about them for a magazine called British Archaeology. And I can only imagine that it was a slow news week because the press got hold of this story. And I was in demand for radio and newspaper interviews for a couple of weeks. And it was reported on the front page of the Times and the Telegraph, the Observer, the Mail, the Mirror. I was on Radio 1, Radio 5 Live, Radio 4, radio stations all over the world. And through doing that, that kind of piqued my interest really in the world of media. And I got to know the people who ran the university PR department quite well, because I was up and down there all the time. And I thought, oh, this is quite interesting. Maybe this is something I'll do something with later. And when I finished my PhD, I was also interested in working in a museum in an educational capacity. My husband, who's in the chemical industry, got a job over here where I live now in North Lincolnshire. So we moved over here, and I wrote to all the museums in the area, of which there aren't very many, admittedly, and there were no jobs at all. And I ended up volunteering at a local cable television station in Immingham, of all places. And it was really great. I absolutely loved it. And after volunteering there for a few weeks, they said, the job of receptionist is available if you want it. And I thought, well, I'm a little bit overqualified with a PhD to be a receptionist, but it's money and it's a good way to get to meet people in the area. So I was networking even then from the sort of very start. So I worked as a receptionist for about a year, and then they'd applied for a big European grant to do some research into local television, and I got a much better job which was paid for by the grant. So I then had my own program, which went out live twice a week. I interviewed all sorts of people live in the studio, and we went out to the community in between times and filmed video footage of things that were going on, and I had a great time. And I did some voiceover work as part of my job there, for promos for the channel, for adverts, for short documentaries that we made, and so on. But I'd never had any formal training in either presenting or voiceover. I left there to have a family, intending to go back, but the company was sold while I was off maternity leave. And so I ended up doing something totally different. Left the world of media, voiceover behind, and went into education. I was working in a sixth form college. And then about 8 years ago, my husband was asked to go and work in the States for a couple of years. So we moved out to Maryland. We lived near Baltimore. The kids went to school. My husband went to work. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do then? And a friend of mine handed me a brochure for a local community college. And so I signed up to do some acting courses, and I took singing lessons, and met loads of great people. And then I took a course which was called Acting for the Camera, which was an evening class, because I thought it would be great to get back in front of a camera again. And only 4 people signed up to this course. So the tutor said to us, well, I've got stuff planned, but because there's only 4 of you, tell me what you're interested in and I'll tailor the course to you. So I said to her, well, I've got some experience of voiceover, but I've never had any training, and I've got no idea how to go about getting into the industry. So she helped me. She was kind of my first mentor, and she put me in touch with a friend of hers who runs a recording studio. He does a lot of corporate stuff and sometimes needs British accents for his work. So that's great. I did some work for him. She told me about the pay-to-play sites, and I signed up with a couple of them and started to get some work. And I realized I would only get more work and better paid work if I'd got a properly produced demo. So I then looked for where I could do that, and I came across Edge Studio. They're based mostly in New York, but they have a satellite studio in Washington, DC, and that was about 40 minutes from where I lived, so that was perfect. And so I signed up with Edge. I did training with them for about 6 months, made my first demos with them before I moved back to the UK. So I started my business in America and then brought it home with me, and I've been back here now since summer of 2014.
It's a remarkable journey you've been on, but we know one another quite well. We were at VO Atlanta last year, and we've bumped into one another on frequent occasions. But we were talking before we came on air that you've pursued your theatrical interest through a local Amdram company.
Yeah.
You're currently trying to get a spot on your local community radio station. You're about to dash off in the next sort of couple of days and do a ghost walk, which is something that you do. You write scripts for things. You have a dog. You have 2 teenage lads and a husband. When do you have free time?
What's free time, Roger?
Well, precisely.
I tend to fill my free time. Yeah.
And part of the filling of the free time is basically the theme and the core of today's webinar. It's all about networking, and it's something that I know that you do absolutely at every opportunity you possibly can. We won't talk in detail about the awards you've won over the last couple of years, but you've done it for small business, you've done it for women in business, you've done all sorts of other bits and pieces. So you know,
I think I'd like to hear about the awards.
Yeah,
a little bit. Which one?
So one of the network that I attend is a local women's group, that Workwise Women we're called, and every year they have an awards dinner, and so last summer I was the recipient of their media award for my services to media, and the award that I'm probably most proud of is in 2017 I was one of the UK top 100 small businesses, which was all part of the Small Business Saturday team are behind that. And the most wonderful thing about that was all the 100 small businesses got invited to number 10 Downing Street for a reception. So that was amazing. That was an absolutely incredible day.
Yeah, meteoric rise or what? I mean, a lot of what you've done is obviously through your own self-determination of wanting to know more about the business, more about how you can develop your business, and all the sort of, I suppose, the theatrical, the vocal bits that make the business work for you. And I have to apologize to everyone, I've got a sore throat, so my voice isn't working too well for me today. But the networking element, to get where you are today, you have developed this sort of networking strand in your business. It's so core to what you do. What was the thought process behind that, and how did you make it a reality?
Well, I think I got into it really because of the job that I was doing at the college before I became a voiceover artist. So I was responsible for making links between the college and local businesses, to look for placements for our students, look for people to come in and give talks and so on. And so the college was a member of a couple of local business networks. And so I went on behalf of the college, and that's how I got to see how it worked. So they were members of the local Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber run speed networking events every couple of months. So I used to go along to those. And they were also members of something called the Business Hive, which is it's a local business networking hub, I guess. They have premises in Grimsby, and they hire out office spaces, and they run events there and so on. And so I used to go along to their networking events. So once I started my own business, it was kind of natural for me to continue doing that. And in fact, when I started in voiceover, after I came back from America, I went back to the college because they'd kept my job open for me, but I only worked for them part-time. So I was able to work for them 15 hours a week, and the rest of the time I worked for myself. But I could go to the networking events on their behalf for free. So I'd take my college business cards, but I'd also take my own business cards. And people knew that I did two things and I wore two hats. And so that was kind of got my foot in the door, really, networking for my own business. And it's just kind of continued on from there. So whenever I see anything advertised locally, networking or a business expo or something, I do my best to get there, because you just never know who you're going to meet in the room.
I remember a photograph maybe even be 12 or 18 months ago of you at your local farmer's market on a wet day with your pop-up, your vocal booth, and you're handing out cards. Now that takes some doing.
It was freezing that day. That was actually part of the Small Business 100. They have this bus that travels around the country in the weeks running up to Small Business Saturday, and they came to Brigg, which is my local market town. And so they said to me, you know, if you want to come and have a stall, you're more than welcome. Well, I've got nothing to sell, but I thought, you know what, I'll take along my mobile studio and people can see what it is I do and hand out cards and so on. But yeah, it was, I'm not sure it's something I'd repeat. It was pretty cold.
Yeah, I'd rather personally have somewhere where it's warm inside the rest of it. The networking stuff, I mean, it obviously comes totally naturally to you because of the, you know, your previous background. Mm-hmm. But for somebody who is I don't know, let's say shy and retiring unless they're in front of a microphone and talking to people and doing what they do best or love best as a voiceover artist. You know, how do you make that leap? How do you sort of put yourself in that frame of mind, the mindset to be able to sort of say, actually, I don't want to sit here and talk to my microphone all day long. I want to go and talk to real people.
Yeah.
Is it a huge leap? It obviously wasn't for you, but I should imagine for
No.
other people. You must come into contact with people who, you know, are the shy and retiring.
Yes, yeah, and there are different kinds of networking. I mean, local to me, I mentioned the business hive. Their networking, if you're shy and retiring, it's probably not for you because it is literally just a room full of people. There's no structure to it at all. You have to make the effort to start a conversation because a lot of those people have been going there for several years. They all know each other. They're on little cliques. They're all talking to each other. And if you're new to networking and you walk into that room, you'd probably turn around and walk out again because it would just feel quite intimidating. You do have to be the kind of person in those situations where you don't mind breaking into some conversation, or, you know, if you see somebody standing on their own, going over and starting a conversation, you can't really expect people to come to you. You've got to be prepared to go to them. So the other kind of networking that I do, and I know that you've been to one of these, Roger, is something called For Networking, which is a network which is national. There are meetings all over the place, and they have a structure to them. So even if you're really shy, you're going to get to talk to at least three people during that meeting because that is part of the way the program works. So you go in, there's informal networking at the start. Then you have a meal together, and during the meal, everybody gets 40 seconds to stand up and say who they are and what they do. And then you can think, okay, well, that person sounds interesting. I'd like to have a one-to-one conversation with them. And later in the meeting, you have 3 10-minute one-to-one meetings. So if you're a bit shyer, you're not so confident about breaking into conversations, something like that would perhaps suit you better, where you're guaranteed to have at least 3 conversations before you come home.
I have to say that I got involved with For Networking because Liz was up the road from where I live sometime during the summer here.
Yeah,
And
right.
I saw one of her posts on Facebook saying that she was doing the Norwich For Networking Forum. And I think I sent you a little email, a message saying, what are you doing on my patch?
Yeah.
But it got me into For Networking. And I went to my local one. I literally have one about 5 miles from where I am standing currently.
Sorry, Roger, before you continue that story, are you guys saying 4 as in number 4?
Number
Absolutely.
4. Yes.
Number 4,
Yeah.
For Networking.
For networking.
And they've got a fantastic website, loads of information. You get an opportunity to go free. I mean, I'm doing this all for Liz because, you know, this is what she did for me. And my local one meets at breakfast time. So it's an 8 o'clock start. You have a little bit of a preamble, tea, coffee, fantastic fry up. And then you get your 40-second elevator pitch, and then you get to talk to people. And these people are there to network as much as you are there to network. So you have this perfect opportunity. Now, if you go the whole hog and do what Liz does, is a fully paid up member and she has the badge to prove it, she can take along a pop-up stand that you can put in the public arena so that people can see who you are as well. I have subsequently discovered that apart from the Norwich one that Liz presented to during the summer and the Durham one, I've got one in Wyndham, I've got one down the road in Thetford. There's lots of them around. And all you got to do is type in to your web browser For Networking and this whole world appears. And you are a prolific speaker at these events because you get the opportunity as a member to have an extended sales pitch, don't you, Liz?
Yeah. I get about 20 minutes. So I've done I've lost count now how many of these, 4 sites they're called. In fact, I'm going to speak at Huntingdon on Tuesday breakfast time. That they invited me. They thought voiceover sounded interesting. They said, come and talk to us about voiceover. And, you know, I try and take every opportunity I can to speak about my business, not just at For Networking, but other networking events that I've been to. You know, if there's an opportunity to speak, I'll put my hand up and say, you know, I'll do that. I can fill 20 minutes for you quite easily. And it's a great way to obviously speak to a whole load of people at once. And you'll be surprised how many people have no idea what it is a voiceover artist does. And very often after I've given a speech, people come up to me after and say, all right, I get it now. And now I know what you do. Now I can think where you might be useful for me, or you might be useful for one of my contacts, because voiceover means nothing to most people.
And I met somebody at one of these sessions. I met somebody at my first session, which was free, who does, primarily he was into sort of marketing and he was into all sorts of things, but a friend of his produced videos and animation and other bits and pieces, and he just put me in touch with them, and we're now happily working away.
And it's not always about the people who are in the room, and there was an example of that today. I've been to 4 networking in Scunthorpe at lunchtime today, and one of my one-to-ones was with a guy who runs a social media marketing company. Now, he doesn't need my services directly, but he knows people who produce videos, and he said, oh, you might be useful for Ben. I can't remember the name of the company, but he said, I'll look him up and I'll put you in touch with each other. So that's great. Something came out of that. And, it's not often that what happened to you happens, where you meet somebody right away who can use your services. It did happen to me the first time I went to 4 networking. I was sitting next to a lady who produced whiteboard animations. Perfect. Although she wasn't looking for a voiceover artist. And she said to me, I've already got 3 people that I use. I'm not really looking for anyone else, but I'll take your card anyway. And later that day, she rang me up and she said, one of my regular ladies has had to go into hospital. She can't do this voiceover. Can you do it? Of course I can. And that was 3 years ago, and I'm working for her regularly. So you never know. And sometimes it can be a really slow burn as well. I remember going to a business expo probably in 2015, and it was the Chamber of Commerce were running the local business expo, and they were having it filmed. So I went along and I had a chat to the production company there, and I gave them my card and I told them what they did. And I said, oh yeah, that's great. If everything comes our way, we'll let you know. I didn't work for them until the back end of last year. So that was 3 years, more than 3 years later, that they finally had a project for me. But they remembered me, and I think we've been in touch on social media since as well. So you just never know. And another example of that, I'd been to a networking, positive networking, this one was called, which was on the other side of Lincoln, a good hour's drive for me. So a bit too far for me to be going to regularly, but you could go once for free as a guest. So I did. And I chatted to this lady, and I can't even remember what her business is, but we weren't particularly relevant to each other, but she took my card. And about 18 months, 2 years later, she sent me an email. She said, oh, do you remember me? We met at Positive Networking. One of my contacts is looking for a voiceover artist. I've still got your card. I thought of you. And I got some work out of that. And that was 2 years down the line from somebody I thought was of no use to me. So you just, like I say, you never know who you're going to meet and who they know who might be useful to you.
I'm just going to dip in because one of the questions Kerry asks, who's in cold Poland, the cost. Now, I mentioned the fact that, the first couple of meetings are free. And if somebody like you, Liz, recommends, people like me or whatever, you get something back, I think, as a byproduct of it.
Yeah.
But there are tiers of, there are levels, aren't there?
There are. So with 4 networking, as Roger says, you can have 2 meetings for free, as it were. You still pay for your meal. But you can go twice without committing to being a member. If you join at your first meeting, it's cheaper than if you join at your second meeting. And I believe the current cheapest way to join, it's £100 for 100 days. So that's kind of a good way to put your toe in the water and see if it's going to work for you. Some of the other networks I go to are much cheaper than that. My local council, that's North Lincolnshire Council, run a business networking for local businesses. That's £60 a year. So that's really, very, 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 very cheap. The ladies network that I go to, that's £50 a year. You have to pay for your meal with that one. The council one, you don't pay for anything else at all. There's another one that I've not tried yet, local to me, which is only £2 a time. So there's kind of something to suit every pocket, really, if you look.
Yeah. And of course, they're not always at breakfast time. Mine was at breakfast time and cost me 15 quid, and it was a fantastic breakfast. Some of the lunchtime, some of the evening events, aren't they?
That's right. So the Scunthorpe one I went to today, that was for networking. It was a lunchtime meeting. Yeah. And here's the thing, it was in one of the poshest restaurants in Scunthorpe. You can't normally eat there for 15 quid. So to get your lunch in San Pietro for £15 and networking, that's a bargain. The food was amazing.
That sounds incredible.
Sorry.
going to jump in for a second, and just for the international folks watching in, same concept applies. Search locally and then go from there.
Yeah, and I think a good place to look at, she's on Eventbrite, because a lot of business networks and business events are advertised on there. So just go on Eventbrite, say you're looking for business events local to you, and a whole load of stuff will pop up. Some of it free, some of it paid, but that's quite a good place to start. In the UK, I would definitely also start by contacting your local council and talking to the probably called Economic Development Department. And they might be able to tell you about things that that they organise in your area. Then there's the local Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Small Businesses. Usually, I think you can go along to your first one for free. A lot of them are like that, so you can try it out without committing to being a member straight away.
And to answer Kerry's question, Eventbrite is an app you can download on your phone. You can go to the website and have a look at as well. Same with For Networking. If you go to their website and look for where the next meetings are, there's a whole list of them currently. Many of them actually in Liz's neck of the woods. The interesting thing about networking, it's not just the face-to-face. We can also achieve the same thing by using social media.
Yeah, absolutely,
and I know I use it. I'm very conscious that Mark Thomas down in Hampshire uses it, and I know you do. But that's the county hours on Twitter, which is fantastic. Explain more, because you've got one tonight, haven't you?
It's Monday. So Monday nights is #Links Hour between 8 and 9 o'clock, and all sorts of local businesses will come onto Twitter at that time, and there's a moderator, and usually there's a theme, and she'll ask some questions which everybody answers, and everyone has a bit of a chat. And something that came out of that for me a couple of years back now was there was a journalist on the Links Hour, and she was looking for people in small businesses who had an interesting story about how they got started. So I contacted her, said, here's my story, if you think that's interesting, I'm happy to talk to you. Yes, she says, brilliant. And she got me a double-page spread in the Lincolnshire Life magazine, which was fantastic. And we've kind of kept in touch since then. And when she needs a quote for something from a small business, she'll ask me. And a contact of hers, another journalist, was looking for somebody in the run-up to Christmas for a Woman's Weekly article. They needed somebody who was in pantomime. I was in pantomime. So I was all over Woman's Weekly in the run-up to Christmas. And then that came about, initially through Twitter. So social media is a great way to network, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Norfolk Hour is hosted by Norwich's community radio station. So it's an hour on Twitter, but also backed up by being on air. So they pick stuff up off of it. It's absolutely fascinating. And they also have, apart from Norwich Hour, they have a Norfolk Hour as well. And, you just participate in these conversations and you just put yourself out there, and you never quite know who is going to ping you a message and want something. So that's particularly great. And of course, there's a traditional media of Twitter and Instagram, which again, I know you make a lot of use of. I certainly do as well, and lots of other people. How do you find that works for you? Particularly, I think Instagram is sort of my default these days. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I've certainly moved on to Instagram a lot more in the last few months, and I'm now planning my Instagram feed in advance, so I know what I'm going to be putting out there. I'm collecting my photos together, I'm doing my captions well in advance and scheduling it so it just automatically then goes out. And to start with, I couldn't really see the point of Instagram for voiceover. I thought, we're not really a visual industry, what do I put on there? But it's not about that. I mean, yes, now and again put on a picture of your microphone, put on one of your demos, but it's more about you, because at the end of the day, people buy from people, and they want to know about the person behind the voice, the person behind the microphone. So what you can show them on Instagram is all sorts of little interesting facets of your life. So it's me walking my dog in the snow was my Instagram story this morning. Or I might put on what I'm drinking at the moment. I might put on what I'm cooking for tea, put on something about my kids, where I'm going on holiday. There's all sorts of things that you can put on there. And people just kind of get that behind the scenes glimpse. And everyone's nosy, aren't they? Everybody wants to know what's going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. But that is the key to social media. It's not necessarily about you and your business. It's about you as a person. You
Mm.
know, when I lived somewhere else, I used to do a daily dog walk, and everyone used to know me from the daily dog walk. And other bits and pieces, and sometimes you'd meet somebody and they go, oh, yeah, I've seen your profile, you've got the 3 dogs, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. Let's have some questions, Lisa. We got questions. There's some interesting comments coming in.
Yes, we've got comments and questions kind of all wrapped into one. So let's go back to Adam. So he's talking about the businessy networking. So the one thing I always tend to either project onto events like that or feel I'm totally suffering from imposter syndrome is how cheesy a lot of the business marketing side comes across. Is that just me, or does anyone else have similar issues? And on top of that, I know everyone else is there to market their pitch and hopefully gain new clients. How do you not fall into their entrapment or shtick about what their product is and lose scope of your own?
Well, I think you have to go in and not sell, because everybody hates that, don't they? Nobody wants to be sold to. And that's the thing with social media as well. You don't want to be on there to sell. I mean, yes, at the end of the day, what you're looking for is more work out of it, but you've got to be more subtle about it than that. And, you know, people can smell it a mile off if you've gone in there just to sell. You need to go in there to be friendly, to be helpful to people, you know, ask them about what they do, and then try and think about who you could put them in touch with who might be useful for their business. So, for example, I met somebody at a networking a while ago who was looking for something to be translated. Well, I've got a connection in a translation company, so I put them in touch with each other. And then they were really grateful, and maybe they'll remember me in the future if someone's looking for a voiceover artist. You know, so I think you have to kind of go not expecting to get a sale out of it. And if you do, you're kind of going about it in the wrong way. And I thought of something else to say about, can you read the first thing you said to me? The first
imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Here's the thing. You know,
that's what I thought you were going to talk about.
Yeah, I kind of couldn't remember what the first thing was. Yeah, so you know your business much better than anybody else in that room. So you're not an imposter. You're an expert in your business. And every meeting I go to, without fail, I will have a conversation with somebody who will say, do you know, I've never met a voiceover artist before. Brilliant. Because now you know me. When you need a voiceover artist or you come across somebody who needs one, you're going to think of me. So don't feel like an imposter, because nobody else knows what you do, and nobody certainly knows it better than you do. You know, you're likely to be the only voiceover artist in the room, and you know, nobody else has got the experience that you've got. So honestly, no need to feel like an imposter.
That's a very interesting point, because the session I went to most recently, I did, you know, the 40 seconds. This is where you refine your elevator pitch, get the sales pitch down into 40 seconds, then you can have the other conversations around it. And someone said to me, but what's a voiceover artist? I don't know what voiceover artists do. And then I just go, well, sit and listen to the continuity between BBC One and, you know, the one program, EastEnders to whatever. Listen to radio ads on the radio, listen to continuity. Anything that talks at you and it's got a human voice attached to it is predominantly a voice artist. If it's not a big name actor, you know, sort of masquerading as a voice artist. It's you know, when you stand at the bus stop and it tells you the number 32 is about to arrive, you know, someone has had to sit and do that. You know, it's like Trish, who's the voice of, you know, the London Underground. Everywhere you go, you hear a voice, or TfL London. You know, someone's had to do this, and they think, oh, really?
Yeah.
Before we move on, just to kind of address this as well. So Dave Jones says, an agent said recently that it's basically a cardinal sin to offer a business card, wait to be asked. But that's different, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I probably do wait to be asked. I wouldn't ever try and force my business card on somebody. At some events, and this is true for networking, there's a table where you can just go and leave your cards, and people then can go and pick up whatever they're interested in. So I don't know whether it's a cardinal sin or not, but yeah, I think it is probably better to wait to be asked. Otherwise, it is a bit pushy.
Actually, just picking up on that, because you mentioned early on in the conversation about how for networking works, you get the opportunity to have 3 10-minute sessions. That's when you give the business card,
Yes,
because you
yes.
have 3 business cards. You label 1, 2, and 3, and you give it to the 3 people you want to. So they have a business card of yours after the conversation or during the conversation.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's reciprocal, because other people will give you their business card. So,
Yeah. And the other thing about networking is, like I say, if you need to go there with the attitude of not selling, but you'll probably also find people who can be your suppliers. I found my accountant through networking. I found my website developer through networking. I found somebody to come and clean my oven before Christmas through networking. So it's obviously it's give and take. Everybody else in the room has got businesses, and you might find a business that you can use.
It's really interesting, because Kerry's just made a very interesting observation here. The Twitter hours. He says regionally here in the Southwest, he's based down in close to Exeter, they frown upon text or image advertising, which is really interesting, because certainly the Norwich and Norfolk hours that I play with, it's all about sticking an image in there. It's all about putting your brand out. It's all about having a snappy little bits and pieces. And then, of course, because you are a part of that Twitter feed, you tend to get stuff in your Twitter feed during the course of the week.
The way the links hour works is they don't like you to be too salesy during the hour, and there's 5 minutes at the end where that's where you can do your pitch. So then you can say, this is my special offer this week, this is the play I'm currently appearing in, whatever. So promotional tweets have to wait to the end of the hour, so that during the hour it's more a conversation about whatever the topic happens to be that day. And what they do really frown upon is scheduled tweets going out in there, and they stick out like a sore thumb because they're not relevant to what's going on in the conversation.
Yeah, that's very obvious. You can see someone's loaded up Hootsuite, and they're just filing them out during that course of the hour. Margaret, I understand the whole thing about smartphones. You're still on a Nokia, I believe, very, very, very trendy. However, things like for networking, things like Twitter, things like Facebook, things like Instagram, they can be accessed through a ordinary computer, PC, Mac, or otherwise. So you don't necessarily need a smartphone. Even Eventbrite, you can access via normal format PC. What else have we got here? And Lisa, picked anything else up?
So I think we've covered quite a lot here. I think maybe we can move on to grants.
Now this is really interesting, because you hear about a lot of the voluntary sector being able to access grants. There's a huge grants market in the arts sector anyway. I receive an email from Norwich Arts every Friday, and it lists all the jobs and all the vacancies, all the things, and then there's a whole screen at the bottom about all the grants that are available. And I haven't really given it a second thought, but you've made real inroads with accessing grants, haven't you?
Yeah. And I think it's about having that kind of mindset, really. And this is something that I've had for a long time. So when I was a student, I got a grant from the British Academy to do my PhD. So I didn't have to pay any tuition fees or lab fees or anything like that. That was all paid for. And my research, like I said at the beginning, part of it was on these lumps of tar with human tooth impressions in, and also other gums and glues. Now, those have been preserved in waterlogged, boggy sites, mainly in Scandinavia. So I needed to go to Scandinavia for the best part of 3 weeks to travel around and go and collect samples for my work. And I couldn't afford to go to Scandinavia. So I started to look and see where I could get grant funding from. And at that time, there was a big volume in the library all about grant funding. And I spent hours poring over it and picking out grants that were going to be relevant to my research. And I applied for, I forget how many, but I was successful nearly every time. So I think a lot of people weren't applying for them. And I got enough money for a 3-week tour of Scandinavia with all my accommodation paid for, all my food paid for, all my transport paid for. So ever since then, if I've wanted to do something, or I've been part of a group that wants to do something, I've always looked for funding. So I was chairman of our preschool when my kids were tiny, and I got funding to buy equipment for the art equipment. I got the playground refurbished. At one point, I got the staff paid because we were really desperate. all sorts of
Incredible.
things. For the school, we got a bike rack for the school. For my theatre group, we've got lighting and sound equipment that allowed us to tour. And I was trying to add it up, and it's something like over £35,000 I've had over the last, well, probably sort of 15, 20 years. So when I started my own business, I decided I would also look for some grant funding. And the first one came about because I went to a business expo, another great place for networking, expos. It was the Lincolnshire Expo last week. And I think it was one of the local universities had a stand there because they had money to help small businesses. And so I had a chat to them and they said, yeah, we can give you, I think it was 12 hours business support. I was like, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of that. And they helped me to update my business plan. They helped me to produce cash flow forecast. And they also pointed me in the direction of a grant. And this one was for equipment. So I've already got my equipment. I've got my studio, I've got my microphone, but I thought it'd be great to have another set of equipment that I just use when I'm traveling. And so I put this to them. They said, yeah, we think the grant will cover that. So I had to put some money to it, what's called matched funding. So the project had to be worth at least £2,000. That's quite easy, isn't it, in our industry to get up to £2,000? So and then they would give me £1,000 of it. I had to find the other 1,000. So with that money, I bought myself a vocal booth to go. I bought another microphone. I bought another MacBook, all the cables to go with it, the pop filter, everything that I needed for my mobile studio. And I got half of it paid for through the grant. Another grant, I've got a list here of things that I've done. Oh yeah, so another one. The Department for International Trade were running some workshops in my area, and I think it was social media for business or something, and I went along to that. It was a 2-3 hour workshop, and because of that I was then on their mailing list, and my local representative from the Department for International Trade dropped me an email and said, do you want to meet for a coffee? I thought, well, I'm not quite sure what you can offer me, but here's the thing, never say no. In networking, never say no, because you just don't know where it's going to lead. So I thought, well, it's a free coffee at the end of the day, if nothing else, isn't it? So I went along and had a chat to him. And he told me about some of the workshops that were coming up that he thought would be useful for me. And he said, we also have some grants for people to apply for. He says, but I'm not sure it's really relevant to you. He said it's for people to go and meet their supplier in a foreign country, or go and explore foreign markets or something. And I said to him, well, would it pay for me to go to a conference? He said, oh yeah, I think so. I said, well, I'd love to go to VO Atlanta. So half my costs for VO Atlanta were paid for by a grant from the Department for International Trade. So that was half my flight, half my accommodation. I also, while I was there, I flew up to Baltimore to go and see my friends. But also I went to visit, potential business connections in Washington, D.C. So they paid for half of that flight. It paid for half my car hire while I was doing that bit of the journey. And so, it made all that quite affordable. So I've had that, and I've had
just on that note, Karis asks, as VOs, would we be applying for arts funding or small business funding?
I would say small business. The arts funding tends to be for theatres, community theatre groups, that kind of thing, and it is really difficult to get. When I worked at the college, I tried to apply for an Arts Council grant for a theatre project, and we just got nowhere with it. It's really oversubscribed. So I would go small business route all the way.
But before you move on, I was going to say what's interesting in the email that I get, and I have no idea why I get it. I just, it started arriving in my inbox, is that you can see who the grant is coming from, and then you can have a look to see what other grants they have in their portfolio. So if you can get onto a mailing list, or you can get onto other people's sites to see where they're coming from, they are really, really useful. But I agree with you, if you're going for arts funding, you've got to.
I mean, if you do want to, if you are looking for grants for, let's say you're in a theatre group and you're interested in getting funding for that, I would recommend going to a website called fundingcentral.org.uk. Now, it's no good for businesses, but it is great for community groups. And you can type into that what it is you're interested in, where you're based, and so on, and it will spit out a whole load of grants that might be relevant for your project.
I think we need to get in contact with Chloe, because Chloe used to work for the Arts Council, so she says.
Ooh, there we go.
Is there a similar search engine like that for small businesses?
Not well. There is. I was going to say there isn't, but there is. I found something yesterday. Now I haven't really checked this out apart from a quick search yesterday. There is something called the Entrepreneur Handbook .co.uk/grants-loans. But a lot of the information I found on there was out of date. Now, I only spent 5 minutes looking at it, in advance of this webinar, but that might be somewhere to have a look for grants for small business. But I think a good place to start is your local council. Again, contact the economic development people, see what they know about in your area. And then other things I found out about through the networking that I've been doing. So we had a lady come to my local 4 networking group in Grimsby a few months back, and she's part of a project called Smarter Energy in North and North East Lincolnshire, and they're looking to work with small businesses to help make them more green. And so I said to her, well, I really need a new boiler because mine's 18 years old and it's not working very well. And she said, do you work from home? I said, yes, I do. She says, well, I think we can help you with that. So I had to go along to a 2-day workshop.
Incredible.
Run by some very enthusiastic German engineers who told us all about different ways of harnessing solar energy, ground source, heat pumps, blah, 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 blah. But having sat through that, I was then eligible for a £500 grant towards the cost of a new boiler. So,
which you had installed before Christmas, wasn't it?
I had installed before Christmas, yeah. That's right.
Perfect timing. Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. Lillian, I know. Hi, Lillian, is in the States. Do you know of any similar sites for US grants?
We had a little chat about this yesterday, didn't we, Lisa? So I did have a little look. And I found a government website, which is usa.gov/state-business. And you can search by state then and see what's available in your area. Now, when I lived in the States, this was sort of before I'd really got into the networking, so it wasn't something that I looked at while I was there. But having said that, I met my first voiceover and business mentor through this course I mentioned called Acting for the Camera, and I found that through my local Parks and Recreation service. So just have a look through, next time your Parks and Recreation brochure comes through, have a look and see what courses they're offering. And there might be something kind of in the voiceover field, maybe in the small business field, in the acting field, and it might be worth going along and seeing who else is in the room and using that as a starting point for your networking.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wow.
And what else have you got on your list? Because I know it's
what else have I got on my list?
There's a long list.
It's interesting, actually. Some of the comments through. Mark's just made a comment about didn't know about 4 networking. Mark, get along there. Pretty swiftish. It's amazing who you can meet, and they do a good breakfast.
They do, or a good lunch,
or
a good dinner. In fact, they do evening meetings as well.
Absolutely.
So, what else? Oh, yeah, another grant I've had came through Business Lincolnshire, which is a kind of a hub website really for local businesses, and through that I found a grant to help me with my website, which isn't finished yet. If you go to my website, it's still my old one, but hopefully in the next 1 to 2 months it'll be my new website on there, which will be half paid for by a grant. So that's helped me to pay for a professional photographer and a professional web developer, and I've had somebody look at my SEO and help me write copy, and so the grant has helped to pay for all of that. What else?
While you are what elsing, how does the grant work in regard to, obviously, unfortunately, one of the nasty sides of the business, doing the tax return at the end of the day? How do you offset?
I'm leaving that to my accountant that I met through networking.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
I really knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
So just something to bear in mind is that The grants won't ever cover the VAT on anything you buy, so you do have to bear in mind that cost is still going to fall to you, unless you're using other businesses who aren't VAT registered, like my photographer wasn't, so that didn't apply in that case. But yeah, buying equipment and so on, the VAT, unfortunately, you've got to fork out for that.
And there was a comment earlier about the skill art form it is to fill out a grant.
Yeah, do you know? Yeah, that's right. So
applications, yeah.
Roger and I were talking about this earlier on. It's always best to have a project in mind before you then start to look for the funding. Don't try and make a fund fit your business because it often won't. So you don't want to try and be shoehorning your project into something where it really doesn't belong. Mm-hmm. The ones that I've applied for recently have been really, really simple to apply for. It's just been a bit time consuming because you've got to get 3 quotes for everything, and you've got to scan your quotes and upload them to the website and so on. But in terms of, writing about what it is you want to do, that really wasn't that arduous. They weren't asking for very much. I know things like Arts Council can be horrifically long to fill in, but these ones for small businesses, they're effectively small pots of money that maybe the local council has got to give away, and they've got to give it away, so they don't want to make it too difficult for you. That's certainly what I've been finding.
Wonderful. Let's see here.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. Sorry.
Okay, I just see Kerry's question there. £100 for 100 consecutive days. Oh, Roger's answered it. Yeah, it is. That's right.
Yeah, and then I think I was just trying to find the URL for the website, which is, he says, desperately looking here, www.4networking.biz, B-I-Z.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Guys, I have one question that came in earlier today. It's kind of a phone in. I don't know if Kenny is watching today, but asks, as a limited company, is it more challenging to identify potential sources of funding?
Ooh, I don't know, because I'm a sole trader, so I don't know the answer to that. Probably not. You can be a limited company and still be an SME, and most of the small to medium enterprise, and most of the funding that I've had has been aimed at SMEs. So I don't think it would make any difference if you were limited.
I think what you have to do is you have to look at the criteria related to the grant, and it will then tell you whether or not you are applicable, or you just ring the number on the bottom and say, look, I'm a limited company, and am I applicable?
Yeah. A couple of other things that I found for, if people haven't yet started up their business, if you're under 30, the Prince's Trust is a good place to go to for, money to help you start up. Or if you've been unemployed for a while and you're thinking of starting up a voiceover business, then there is something called the New Enterprise Allowance that you might want to look into. I don't know how long you have to be unemployed for. This was just something I found very quickly yesterday when I was doing a little bit of research. So what else was I going to say? I've just written down a few kind of do's and don'ts, really, and a few points about why bother networking. I think we've probably covered most of it, but to get work, obviously, is what we're after at the end of the day. But people will only come to you if they get to know you, like you, and trust you. And by going networking, that's a good way to start to meet people. And if you're consistent and you always show up at the same meetings, people know where to find you, and they can get to know you better through these 10-minute one-to-one appointments that Roger and I were talking about earlier on. And sometimes, I'll have a one-to-one with somebody and we won't talk about business at all. We'll talk about our family or, holiday they've just been on. And it's just a way to get to know people better. And once they know you better, then they're more likely to do business with you. So like I said before, you need to go not with the mindset of, I've come here to sell. You haven't. You've come here to get to know people and to be friendly and to be helpful to people when you can. The other thing is something else you want out of it really is to raise awareness of what you do. Like I said earlier on, a lot of people don't know what it is voiceover artists do. So get out there and educate them, tell them what you do. And then they'll be thinking, oh yeah, do you know, I really hate the sound of my voicemail. Maybe I'll get a professional to do it. So yeah, raising awareness. For business support, a lot of the networks that I go to are full of other small to medium enterprises, small business owners like myself. We all have similar problems. We've all had to comply with GDPR, for example. And it's good to get that support from other people who are going through what you're going through. Even if you're not in the same industry, you will still hit some of the same kinds of problems. So that's good. To find suppliers, like I said, I found my accountant, my web developer, someone to clean my oven. I found my plumber who installed my boiler that I'm getting £500 towards. I found him through a networking event. I actually met him we've not mentioned this one at all, BNI, which again is across the country.
Oh yeah.
Now you can go to BNI, like for networking, you can go along as somebody's guest without joining. You just pay the fee for the meeting. I wouldn't join BNI myself. I'm not sure that it's the right network for me. But if I can go to something for free, I'm going to go, because you don't know who you're going to meet in the room. So I've been to a couple of those. And at the first one, I met somebody who needed a voiceover for one of his clients' websites, which I did. And I also met somebody who put me in touch with a company who produce on-hold sales messages. I've had lots of work from that. And another one, I was sitting next to a lady and I said to her, you know, I've tried for ages to get in with Lynx FM, you know, and try and get on their roster of voiceover artists. I know somebody you can contact. She said. She put me in touch with them that day, and the following day I'd recorded an advert for them. So I'm not paid to go to BNI, but I've had work out of it. So
and the initials BNI stand for, sorry?
Do you know what? I'm not sure. Ends Network, I should think.
Yeah, something network. Yeah. Just go back. Sarah Jane. Hi, Sarah Jane. 3 10-minute meetings. Do they choose who you network with? No. You choose who you network with, and that's based on basically the sales pitch, or rather your 40-second elevator.
Seconds, yeah.
Pitch. You know, you or the pre-breakfast, lunch, dinner networking you do. So yeah, you get to choose. Yeah. And you can meet some really interesting people. Yeah, as a result of it.
Yeah.
Well, the question I'm going to ask you then, Liz, is, you know, we're all very busy. We're all doing our own things. There are only so many hours in the day and days in the week and months in the year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how much, certainly I know from my own experience, you go for a networking breakfast, you got to take 3 or 4 hours out of the day, but it's early in the morning. But how much time do you spend across a week out networking?
I'd probably go to one event a week. Now that might be a full networking meeting. Next week I'm going to the Workwise Women's event, that's an evening one, 5:30 till 7:30. Actually, Friday morning I'm going to one. It's a free one, but it's only an hour, 8:30 till 9:30, and it's somewhere where I can walk the dog afterwards. So that kind of kills several birds with one stone. So and a few weeks ago I went to one in Grantham, which is an 1.5 hour drive for me, but there's a company there that I really want to work with. So I arranged to go visit them, see their studios before I went to the meeting. So that kind of made it a more worthwhile trip. Because you, Roger, you're very rural like I am. It's a drive to anywhere for us, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, my nearest meetings are usually at least half an hour drive away. You've got to add that on, of course, to the meeting time that you're out of the office.
You say that, but as I said very early on in the webinar, that, you know, I've got one 5 miles away in Dereham, which takes me at least 6 minutes to get to. Wyndham is about 15 minutes in that direction, and Norwich from me is 20 minutes or so. So yeah. I'm very lucky. We've got stuff very, very local, and that's the point about going onto the website and seeing where they are, because you might think, oh, there's nothing in my neighborhood, and then all of a sudden, whoa,
yeah,
you've got something. So yeah, 1 or 2 times a week. I think that's about right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is a cost involved, isn't it? Because, breakfast isn't free. It's 15 quid a shot or whatever. If you're going to pay your 100 days or your annual membership, it's a couple of £100 on top of that. But if it gets you the payback, if you can recoup the income
Yeah.
through these meetings, it's very, very worthwhile.
And you can offset it to tax as well. You know, it's
absolutely
an allowable expense.
Yeah,
which is a bonus.
I've got a question about you mentioned earlier expos and conferences, the bigger networking things. So what's the payoff for those? Do you find that those are worth it?
I do, actually. I do. I always go to the Lincolnshire Business Exhibition, which was last week. And they had actually combined that this year with the Lincolnshire Tourism Exhibition. Now, something I really enjoy doing is audio tours. So there was just like a room full of people for me to talk to and say, here's my card, I do audio tours. So hopefully something will come of that. But then there's always marketing businesses in the room. There's often there's nearly always a production company making a video of it. So that's a good way to get to speak to them. Telecoms companies, there's always telecoms companies at these things, and sometimes they haven't really thought about marketing on hold sales messages to their customers. And I've got a couple of clients now that I've met through network, and they install telephone systems. I said, well, how about adding, offering this service on top? And they're like, oh yeah, I've never thought of that. And and quite often, well, certainly at the Lincolnshire exhibition and another one I go to, which is run by the Chamber of Commerce locally, once a year, they'll run like speed networking sessions as part of it. So you can go along and meet a whole load of people. I'm just going to have a quick drink. But,
while you drink, I was going to say this, something I didn't get to go in the end, but the Chamber of Commerce usually have a big free event for small businesses sometime during the year. The Norwich Chamber of Commerce had a barbecue in the evening on a Saturday night, sponsored by one of the really big telecoms companies in Norwich this year, and I couldn't make it. Really annoying. But there were potentially, I think there were about 350, 400 people there. A perfect opportunity. And you've got lots of other so look at the Chamber of Commerce as well. There's a question here. I know we're vastly running out of time. Adam just asked the question, how do you juggle the networking with, in his case, he's got a full-time job as well. I suppose it's making the effort to find some time. If you're not rostered onto work, or you work flexible hours or something like that, go and do that.
I mean, there are events that run in the evening. Like the ladies networking that I go to is 5:30. The local council run network used to be in the evening at 5:30, so people could go on the way home. The 4 networking evening meetings I think start at 6:00. The breakfast meetings are 8 till 10, so that's probably not much good for you, but BNI tend to meet a lot earlier. Some of them are meeting at like 6-7 o'clock in the morning, so you could potentially fit one of those in before you started work. So I think it's just sort of having a look around and seeing what's in your area and what times they are. Eventbrite again is your friend there, and you can probably find something that you can go to after hours or before hours.
The interesting question, actually. Richard, you say the network breakfasts are all very early because the members all have full-time jobs. Actually, I find some of the members have full-time networking jobs because they just go from one breakfast to the next breakfast to the next breakfast to the next breakfast. But they're in that position to be able to do so, which is really interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one other thing is that as a result of, I know in my area there are a number of voiceover artists. So we actually have a breakfast periodically in a local hotel, and a couple of the guys have got virtual assistants who do a lot of work for them. So we just get together and they bring their virtual assistants along with them for breakfast as well. And we sort of compare notes, and one of them will go, I can help you with that. And I can help you with that and other bits and pieces. And it's great. You start to create your own network within the network.
Yeah.
Liz, thank you so much. This is such an incredible hour, and I think some of the huge takeaway is something that Kerry just pointed on when in one of his messages. He says it's so good to hear that you don't have to be in or near a major city for networking to work for you as a VO.
No, absolutely you don't. No. There's meetings all over the place.
Yeah. And as a complete footnote, one that's close to me in Wyndham is supposedly one of the largest in the country. They have something like 100 plus members who go to breakfast once a month. Haven't been yet. I should go.
Definitely.
That was wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Liz?
Consult my notes.
Okay.
I think we did. Oh, something else. Offer to speak. I think we did cover that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
But if any opportunity to speak, do that, because that'll really raise your profile. Get your elevator pitch sorted out. At the 4 networking, certainly you get 40 seconds to stand up and speak. I think BNI you get 60 seconds. So make sure you can condense down what you do into that time, or just talk about one aspect of what you do. What I've started doing actually at 4 networking, because it's something that's relevant to everybody, is talk about voicemail messages, because everybody has one of those. And I say to people, do you hate hearing the sound of your own voice when it's recorded? And I get to put their hands up, and loads of people stick their hand up. I say, well, do you know what? That comes across in your voicemail message. How do you want to appear to your customers? What do you want your first impression to be when they call your business? Do you want it to sound a bit unsure and nervous, or do you want it to sound really professional? And then I offer to do it for them.
And the first thing I did on my very first 40-second elevator pitch was, I got up and I said, the first thing I want you to do is close your eyes and just listen to me.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah. And, and they don't have to look at you. They just listen to you.
Yeah.
And if you pitch it right.
Yeah. Another important thing is to, particularly if you've had one-to-one appointments with people, is to follow up afterwards. Maybe connect to them on LinkedIn, perhaps drop them an email saying it was really nice to meet you today, and then they've got your email address should they need to find you again in future. So that's a really important thing to do too.
I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, aren't we, Lisa?
Yeah, so just as we had said in the beginning, we knew we were going to have lots to talk about. That's right, and go right over. Thank you so much, Liz.
You're welcome.
Really, so much to write down. My notepad is full, and I think so is for the rest of everybody else. So thank you, Roger. Thanks.
It's my pleasure. Have we got one lined up for next week? Are we doing something next week, or are we having a little bit of a breather?
Next week we have some surprises, so okay. I'll just leave it at that. Okay. That's right. So members, you'll be the first to know. So we'll get all that out there. Continue to tweet us and share your experience today. #VonWebinar, and we are at Network VO. Liz, if you want to share your social media, we can put that down in the chat box.
Yeah, so on Twitter and Instagram, I am Liz Drury VO, and you can find me on Facebook as well, and LinkedIn. If you just look for Liz Drury or Liz Drury Voiceovers, you're bound to find me. I'm everywhere.
That's right. You're everywhere. All right, guys. Thank you again so much. And thanks, everyone, for watching. See you on the next one.
Catch you soon.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.